While eating, he suddenly had a bold idea. Seeing that the prison guard wasn't paying attention, he discreetly rubbed the spoon on the sole of his shoe until it became dirty, then casually called the guard over, saying his spoon was dirty and needed to be replaced. His teammate instantly understood his intent and made the same request. Seeing their serious expressions, the prison guard didn't suspect anything and agreed to their requests. However, this oversight would set the stage for one of the greatest prison breaks in history. When the two men swaggered up to the front desk, the accomplice purposely distracted the prison guard with endless chatter. Seeing that the guard's attention was successfully diverted, the man quickly took the opportunity to grab a new spoon. But no one noticed that he had actually taken two. However, escaping with just a spoon was far from enough. He still needed to craft a more useful tool. The next day, he traded 20 servings of dessert to an old prisoner with connections, getting some additional supplies. Once everything was ready, the man first snapped the spoon in half. Then, he disassembled a nail clipper and used the file to grind a coin into powder. Next, he lit a match and connected the spoon handle to the file. Under the intense heat, the coin powder quickly started to melt. Before long, he successfully completed the welding, crafting a handy tool. Next, it was time for a test. He had his accomplice keep watch, ready to whistle if the prison guard approached. Inside the cell, there was a ventilation duct. Previously, he had tried chiseling it with the nail clipper, but found it ineffective, which is why he made a new tool. As expected, it worked much better than the nail clipper. However, just as he was fully immersed in chiseling, the prison guard suddenly came for inspection, and his accomplice had dozed off. Luckily, another prisoner, a black man, deliberately engaged the guard in conversation, waking the accomplice. He was about to whistle, but realized he didn't know how. Seeing this, he quickly grabbed a cup from the table and banged it against the bars. Fortunately, the man was alert. Hearing the guard's footsteps, he quickly covered the hole with something. He kept talking to the guard, but his focus remained on the tool beneath him. If the guard noticed, the consequences would be unimaginable. Fortunately, the guard didn't pay attention. After he left, the man reminded his accomplice to be more vigilant, then resumed chiseling the wall. After a while, he noticed that the vent was secured by bolts, and he would need another tool to remove them. The next day, on his way to the woodworking area, he discreetly emptied the soil he had chiseled off from his pockets while the guard wasn't looking. Once inside, he quickly made a wooden chip, planning to use it to remove the bolts securing the vent. But how could he bypass the metal detector during the inspection? This, of course, was no challenge for a man with an IQ of 200. When the guard checked, he deliberately took out the wooden chip, claiming it was for hanging his clothes. In the end, the prison guard confiscated the wooden chip, but the man had secretly hidden another one in the sole of his shoe. The first chip was just a decoy. He wedged the wooden piece into the bolt, and all he had to do was push it with his foot. Soon, he effortlessly removed the iron grate. Eagerly, he poked his head through the opening and saw that the space was filled with various pipes. Following those pipes might lead them to an escape route, but it was clear that escaping would require a much more detailed plan. First, they had to figure out how to avoid the guards' surprise inspections. If the guards discovered that the ventilation duct had been tampered with, the consequences would be severe. Second, they needed to ensure they weren't caught during room checks. The clever man quickly came up with a solution, using paint and newspapers to create a replica of the iron grate over the vent, and then covering the opening. As for evading the inspections, that was simpler. He could make a fake head out of newspaper and place it on the bed. In the dim light, it would be hard for the guards to tell if it was real or not. But there was still a bigger problem. After escaping, they would have to cross the sea, as the prison was located on an island. How could they get past the strait ahead of them? Another accomplice worked at the prison barbershop and was able to gather some hair. With the man's ventilation passage already open, his role now was to cover for the other three while they chiseled open their own vents. The next day, the accomplice brought the hair, and Charlie successfully requested paint from the guards. Now, all they needed was newspaper. Fortunately, prisoners were allowed to read daily, so he asked a prisoner in charge of the library, a black man, for some newspapers. With all the materials ready, the man immediately began crafting the fake heads. He mixed the chiseled wall fragments with water to create a makeshift cement, then layered it over the newspaper. Soon, the basic model was complete, and he moved on to painting. Thanks to his skill, the fake head looked exactly like him, so lifelike that the guards would never notice. He also made a replica of the iron grate and painted it so convincingly that it could easily pass as the real one. To be cautious, he decided to scout ahead. Crawling through the vent, he climbed up the pipes. But just then, a guard came for inspection. Charlie quickly banged on the bars to warn him. The guard looked at the bed for a while, but didn't realize that the figure lying there was a fake. Meanwhile, the man had reached the upper level of the prison through the ventilation ducts. Just when he thought he could keep climbing, he found a steel door blocking his way. He jumped with all his might, but couldn't reach it. Before he could think of a solution, the guard came for another inspection. As the guard bent down to pick up his baton, he unintentionally glanced at the man's bed and noticed something odd about the hair. Suspicious, he reached out to touch it. The next day at lunch, he told his accomplices about the previous night's close call with the guard. Fortunately, everyone else had made good progress. Charlie was still chiseling the wall, but the other two had already finished crafting their fake heads. He decided to go up again that night with John to check things out. When night came, they quickly climbed through the pipes. With John's help, the man managed to reach the grate. Once up there, he discovered that the steel door was secured by several large metal covers, which couldn't be removed by hand alone. They needed a power drill and some wiring. Conveniently, there was a socket nearby, but obtaining such tools from inside the prison seemed nearly impossible. Even if a prisoner had a small metal piece on them, the guards would demand answers, let alone if they were caught with a drill, the ultimate escape tool. However, where there's a will, there's a way. The next day, during a music class, the man noticed a fan in the room, but it lacked both a drill bit and wiring. So he once again turned to the old prisoner for help, agreeing to give him all his future desserts in exchange. But there was still one more issue: how to sneak the fan past the guards. You would never guess how he did it. Boldly, the man placed the fan right inside his instrument case. His accomplices thought he was insane. If caught, it could very well cost him his life. When the guard was about to inspect the instrument case, Charlie was so nervous that he couldn't even look at the man. But in a bold move, Charlie questioned the guard, saying, "Isn't the instrument case supposed to contain instruments?" This left the guard speechless. In the end, the man successfully passed the inspection and retrieved all the necessary tools. After assembling the power drill, the two of them began their operation. With John's help, the man climbed back up to the steel door. He hooked his feet around the grate to steady himself. Once in position, John handed him a steel pipe, which the man used to pry open the bars. He needed to get across to the other side to continue his work. The noise, however, caught the attention of the guards below, but the two were so absorbed in their task that they didn't notice the danger approaching. With the help of the drill, the metal cover started to loosen. Fortunately, just as the guard came to check, the man had stopped working. The guard, thinking he had misheard, turned and walked away. Now everything was ready, except for life vests and a raft. One of the accomplices assured them that everything would be prepared by Tuesday. Hope was within reach, but Charlie began to have second thoughts. He feared being caught by the guards and executed. The man could only comfort him, reassuring Charlie that he had confidence in leading them all to freedom. But on that very day, something unusual happened in the prison. During a routine inspection, the warden accidentally dropped his nail clippers into a cell. He ordered a nearby guard to unlock the door. After retrieving the clippers, he noticed a portrait the prisoner had drawn of him. Feeling insulted, the warden immediately revoked the prisoner's right to paint and confiscated all of his artwork. The old prisoner lost all hope after that incident. He had been sentenced to 99 years in prison for accidentally hitting someone with his car in what should have been a routine traffic accident. But since the victim was a police officer, his sentence was harsh. Given his age, he knew he wouldn't live to see the day he'd be released. And now, after losing his only passion, painting, because of that portrait, despair had fully set in. One day, he secretly slipped something into the man's pocket, then requested an axe from the guards, claiming he needed to build a table and chair. But in the next moment, right in front of the guard, he chopped off his own finger. The sudden, shocking act left the guard paralyzed with fear, and the old prisoner was forcibly taken away. The man gathered up the severed finger, and when he checked his pocket, he found a flower, a delicate bloom that had drifted over from the other side of the island, symbolizing freedom. It was a sign from the old prisoner, a final message of belief that the man would one day escape and regain his freedom. The man decided to carry the flower with him as a reminder of hope. He remembered how, when he first arrived at the prison, the old prisoner had taken care of him. But on that same day, the warden noticed the flower. Growing any plants or flowers was strictly forbidden in the prison, and without hesitation, the warden crushed it in his hand. The sight of this act enraged the old prisoner to the point that he suffered a heart attack and died on the spot. The warden's harsh words, combined with the old prisoner's death, only solidified the man's determination to escape. The next day, he said goodbye to the black prisoner who managed the library. The moment he spoke, the other man immediately understood his intention. They shook hands, a silent gesture of respect and farewell, knowing that this might be the last time they saw each other. Just before the escape, the warden came for a surprise inspection. It seemed he had sensed the man's escape plan. He searched the entire bed, but found nothing suspicious. However, the shrewd warden's attention was drawn to the music box, with its back facing the ventilation duct. He first examined the box. The man was extremely anxious, fearing that the warden might discover the fake iron grate. Fortunately, the warden didn't notice anything amiss, because the painting was quite realistic. They had to act quickly. Otherwise, there would be no chance if they separated later. Fortunately, the accomplices had already prepared everything needed. He decided to move forward with the escape plan tonight. Since he had previously scouted the route, everything was going smoothly. However, at this critical moment, Charlie, overcome with fear, chose not to join the escape. The thought of a failed attempt leading to a brutal execution was too much for him to bear. The man couldn't persuade him further. He had no choice but to proceed. When the guards came for their nightly inspection, they saw the prisoners apparently asleep in their beds, but failed to notice that the figure in the bed was a fake. Meanwhile, Charlie was alone, crying quietly. The guards, seeing this, merely shook their heads, noting that such emotional distress was common in the prison. On the other side, the three escapees had reached the steel door. To be cautious, they decided to send John up first to scout. Once he was up, he immediately pushed the bag from the ventilation duct, creating a noise that caught the attention of the guard in the watchtower. However, when the guard used the searchlight to investigate, he didn't see anything unusual and assumed it was just a small animal. After the searchlight was turned off, John quickly climbed out of the duct and knocked on the pipe to signal the others. Hearing the signal, the man quickly sent the next accomplice up, handed him the life vests and raft, and then had him pass these items to John. Now it was time for him to make his own escape. Because one of the accomplices was larger, he got stuck at the pipe entrance and had to force his way through. Fortunately, he eventually managed to squeeze out and quickly hid in a corner where the searchlights couldn't reach. Once both of them were safely hidden, the man also made his way out. Meanwhile, Charlie finally gathered the courage to take a risk, but he wondered if it was too late to join them. The three escapees, seeing that the time was right, grabbed their equipment and made their move. Despite the constant searchlights sweeping over the area, they remained undetected until they vanished into the darkness. Once they were safely out of sight, the man peeked back at the ventilation duct, but Charlie was still missing. With no other choice, he had to press on. They donned their life vests and began to climb down. The team had to constantly avoid the searchlights. The descent was relatively smooth, and they were soon outside the prison walls. However, as John was coming down, an unexpected problem arose. His life vest got snagged on the pipe, which was very dangerous. Any noise could trigger an alarm. Fortunately, no such alarm was raised. To avoid damaging the life vest while crossing the barbed wire, they decided to toss it over one by one. The man climbed up first, moving swiftly as time was running out. Meanwhile, Charlie had also managed to reach the steel gate. Alone, he couldn't reach the top. He regretted not being braver and escaping with the others. But now, everything was set and there was no turning back. Soon, the three men climbed over the barbed wire and made their way towards the perimeter of the prison. They reached a grove of trees and, after crossing a road, arrived at the coastline. They quickly took out the inflatable raft and began blowing it up. With their combined efforts, the raft was soon fully inflated. Next, they donned their life vests, boarded the raft, and prepared to cross the strait. Despite the bone-chilling cold of the sea, they were undeterred by the freedom that lay ahead. Hours later, as the sun, symbolizing hope, began to rise, the guards started their morning inspections. When the warden arrived at the man's cell, he found him still in bed, seemingly asleep. When the prison guards blew their whistles, the black prisoner revealed a smile of relief. Finally, someone had managed to escape from this prison. The warden sent people to search everywhere nearby, but they could not find any trace of the escapees. All that was left were a few photos wrapped in raincoats and a single flower symbolizing freedom. The staff believed the escapees had likely drowned, as it was impossible to swim across the strait. However, The warden understood that they had indeed escaped successfully. To protect his reputation and avoid the stigma of the first successful escape since the prison's establishment, he had the news announced that the 3 men had drowned. This is a true story. Within a year, the infamous Alcatraz prison was closed. Despite extensive efforts, the police never discovered the whereabouts of the escapees. Their ultimate fate remains unknown.